this part of the talk, which is I am going to be writing code to accomplish something, is still for software developers. And that means that you need to learn software development fundamentals. There's really no short-circuiting that. I don't even think with the design tools Syed's going to show that we're short-circuiting that. We're just delaying that. But with that comes some kind of, I would say, opinions of mine that I think I do want to communicate. One of them is that there is no replacement for mid and senior level developer knowledge. So even though my productivity went from 1x to 10x, it's only 10x under the framework of me already coming with a lot of prior knowledge. So I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to go through some of the baseline concepts. And then one of them, but keep in mind that whereas it can give you a prototype, it could be totally not doing conventional things that will come up and bite you later. And so having a good sense for standard software development is going to become important here. So one of the things that we have going on is you have a project structure. And then generally under the project, you're going to have a series of folders. We're talking about a project like I have an open source thing on GitHub. What's very common is that you don't actually put your code in the root folder. This is where you're describing it. What you will tend to have is you will have a README. And the purpose of the README is perhaps exactly what you think it would be, which is it is, so I'm going to have to admit people as we go along. The purpose of the README is, yes, to give background on the project, but actually the most important purpose is spin-up guidelines. How do you start? So spin-up guidelines. So I am a new developer. I'm a junior. I just joined this team, or you hired a contractor. The contractors received your code. There is a huge cognitive jump from here is a code that runs a web app to like how do you actually run it? Is it built for Apache? Is it built for Android? What are the dependencies? All these things. So the README having spin-up guidelines is really important. The code then gets stuffed into the source folder. So somewhere in the source folder, you're probably going to have your main.py file. Something, whatever it is that launches it is going to be under the source folder. What then do you have generally? Well, you're probably going to have infrastructure files. What we'll call this maybe developer infrastructure. So this takes a few different forms. So for example, the one that we're going to use today is your dev environment Docker config file, right? So just as a developer, you have a kind of very loosey-goosey environment. And by environment, I mean you're running a server on your local system. It has all the dependencies installed. Generally, yeah, you want to be kind of similar to production, but it does not need to be an exact match. But the key with these developer environments is that they're quick to spin up. If you come onto this and you have somebody else coming on, what might they need? Other things that you'll have are continuous integration configuration. So CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. These are things like Google GitHub Actions, and what they do is they tend to be checks. So they're checks of your code. So if you have a standard that you hold your code base to, it has to have a syntax level of quality. Or if you have unit tests and you're actually able to test your code, you can automatically run those anytime somebody tries to push this. And the conventional way that this is done is you have a development server. We have local development. You have a development server, and then you have a production server. When you push to the development server, it should run and find all those issues for you and not let you merge it to development until you resolve all the issues. Likewise, as best practices, you also run these checks again going into the production server, but that's should automatically pass at that point. So this is going to be important because you might think that when you're starting with the cursor, the first thing you say is like, I want a web app that does investing, right? I want a investing web app. But in fact, that's not what you want. You actually want a developer environment first. Once you have a developer environment, then you want to build your web application here in the developer environment. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to set up a developer environment. I have a thought that I'm going to try out on this call. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm going to write my prompts in this Google chat, and then you guys are welcome to follow along if you want. Now, your mileage may vary. We won't get exactly the same things. If other folks join and ask for the link, please share it with them. But I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So first of all, what is Cursor? Cursor is an integrated developer environment. It's a coding tool, and it's made for software development just like anything. The key is that it comes with this other panel, which has two modes, an agent mode and an ask mode. Agent is able to auto-complete entire files for you and also run commands. And that's a big distinction, is that it's running commands. So you could theoretically recursively delete anything, right? So be careful when you run these. What you're going to find is that there'll be sanity checks where it says, is it okay to run this? And you have to approve it. Generally, it's okay, but be careful. You can. There's horror stories out there you can find in the web. And then ask is just like ChatGPT, but for your code base. So I'm going to start here in agent mode. Now, a few things. Cursor is the origin story of it was a clone of VS Code. So VS Code was open source. Cursor came in, they cloned it. So all the plugins and extensions that you have for VS Code work in Cursor. It's great. We love it. And their free mode is pretty good. What I will say is that for the first few months that I was using this, you can get pretty far in the free mode. You just sign up with your email or such. They do have like a $20 per month next level, and you should be just fine with that. However, if you're like a super advanced player, they have an extended one for $100 a month. I have not needed that. In fact, like I'm saying, you can probably get most of what you need on the free level. Try it out. The first thing that we're going to want to do is set up a developer environment. Now, there's a lot of choices going back to this. What is your dev environment? So Docker, virtual machines, there's other types of containers that you want to do. Basically, a lot of the common ones now are building a virtual machine on your local. So if I'm running Windows, which I am, I'm just going to spin up a little Linux environment and just run everything in that. And I will configure that Linux to be very minimal and also very aligned with whatever the configuration of the actual server is. By default, just know that it will select probably good Linux for us. So I'm going to start with, we want to create a developer environment for a web application. Please create a basic README file that describes setup, and keep that file updated. So this part right there, keep the file updated, is a command that implies there's a memory, and that's what you want to do. It's not going to be perfect, but literally, if you just tell it to keep things updated, it will make an effort to. It sometimes forgets, you have to remind it. But if you don't tell it, it may ignore it. It tends to hyper-focus on just the files you're looking at any given time. But I'm going to issue an ongoing command and hope that it makes the best effort to keep this updated. So I want a Docker environment running Apache for MySQL. We do have to pick a tech stack because I'm joint producing this in Python and the Moco Makers groups. We're just going to choose a Python framework. So let's do good old Flask. I'm pretty familiar. I want a Docker environment running Apache with MySQL. Let's create a basic Flask web app with let's do a greetings page for a project called Investment Portfolio. Get that running. All right, so it's doing a few things. List current directory. Great, I have a creating working space. Starting off by creating the README. And what I have found as far as a best practice is that having a README, it goes two ways. Hold on, let me see if I can paste this into the thing properly. Okay. All right. Thankfully enough, spelling doesn't matter. It's pretty smart. Now it's doing a few things. You'll notice that there is, first of all, you'll notice I'm in agent mode. If I were to just ask it a question, it would not actually, it would not actually do the things. But what you're seeing here on the left is that it actually created the files for me. And in fact, here's the README. So we're in a folder. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to right click and do Reveal in File Explorer. It'll jump to the project. I had prior created this cursor demo folder. It was empty before. Now it has all these things. We're at the top level of the folder. Here's the README. It's getting ready with requirements.txt. Those tend to be Python libraries that you need to run for the project. The most important thing is actually the Docker file and the Docker Compose. Docker Compose is a nice convention for how do you set up a server. And in fact, you can have two images here, which we do. We have one container with a MySQL instance. So a container runs a full operating system. We're running a full version of Linux. Inside this full version of Linux, it is designed and pre-configured to have already installed a MySQL instance. You're seeing that I'm passing in some parameters for username and password. Those are a reference to a environmental file, which we have here in an example. We'll circle back to that. And then we have a web application, which is going to be probably, yeah. So here's our web server instance. And it's just going to be probably Apache, something like that. Some other stuff we don't need. It can do more than we need. PHP MyAdmin is for interacting with the database. We don't need that. All right, but it was a good start. Now, before even thinking about it, before reviewing the code, I'm actually going to review the human files. So one of the pro tips is interact with the system and make it explain to you in ways you're comfortable with what it's doing. Now, it looks like you'll see that there's this accept and reject. This is how it proposes things on your system. And you can either one by one accept or reject them, or what I tend to do, especially for the early stuff where I'm just kind of blindly trusting it, is just keep all. So look, it's still running. There's a few things here. I should probably get my Docker running. Docker doesn't tend to do well unless the instance is running. All right, what's been creative, blah, 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 Flask developer, quick start. Just waiting for the agent to finish. I think the agent has finished to its satisfaction. Anytime you can stop it if it's going down a rabbit hole. Let's take a look. So we have our app.py, we have an init, environment file where we setting up our things. Now this is environment.example. We'll probably want to switch that over. But again, I don't want to think about it too much. I know things prior knowledge on the structure of folders and what it's defaulting to. But what I also want it to do is just tell me in the README what I need to do. All right, clone the repo, unneeded. I will actually take this opportunity to talk about best practice. Best practice with normal code is version control. Best practice for Cursor is 100% version control. So here's what's going to happen when you start having it do things for you. Is you'll say fix this bug, and it'll be like, huh, I found a bug. Why don't I rewrite your entire user model to do something totally different and try that out? And it'll replace like 4 or 5 of your files. Maybe that's a rabbit hole. Maybe you're like, no, that's not what I really wanted. If you didn't have version control, going back is, unlike code where you're just changing a few lines, this could be whole project level changes. So there's even more of an impetus to know Git version control and to use it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to initialize the Git repo. We'll go ahead and commit, initial commit. Now, I'm not the best at this, but I'm just telling you best practice. So git add dot first, add everything, then commit it. Git status. Yep. All right. So it's all committed. Haven't even run it yet, but we're just getting it going. All right. So we're back to reading the README. All right. So yes, follow it top to bottom. It's telling you what to do. Copy it to an env file. That sounds fine. So one thing that's best practice here, and you'll see this right away, is that we have a file where our passwords are. And this could include, in local development with local databases, it doesn't matter. But if, for example, you had an API key, you want to add it. So do avoid this. I've seen a lot of this, especially with the laziness around AI, is you have to exclude certain files from version control. Now, the way to do that is this .gitignore file. It looks like it auto-created it for me. If you don't see it, add it, and then add the name of the file that you're excluding. Now, there's for Python projects, there's a lot of conventional ones, and it went ahead and did a best guess effort. That's pretty good, right? It already has our .env file not in version control. But that's the thing that especially like non-coders may not be aware. You don't want to push something or share anything where you have a hard-coded password. It's okay to use passwords, but you never add it to version control ever. You always have a parameters file, or the other thing that people do is they'll have it on their operating system as a variable in their command line. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but the way that I tend to recommend is have a parameters file. In this case, we're using a command prompt based .env style, but there's also like .yaml files, which I really recommend. Just pick one, use a parameters file, and you're good from that point forward. So for local development, I like to keep things simple. So I'm just going to create everything, same username, password. That's just something I picked up that simplifies my life locally. It would be obviously much more strict even by the point you get to the developer server. All right, so we'll continue. We have copied it over, edit. Okay, so we've edited. Now there's a few other things. Are we running it development mode? Yes. Is it debug? Sure. Secret key? That's fine. If I wanted to change the port number, that's fine. I've had some problems in the past with 000, but I think that's fine for now. It should work inside of the Linux that we have. Okay. All right. So now let us go ahead and, well, we'll continue and should get to running it. Build and start the environment using a make file. I don't think so. I don't want to use a make file. I don't. That's a very it's a very C way to do things. I'm not a big fan of make files. They're convoluted syntax. So let's go ahead and prompt engineer that away. Option 2, using Docker Compose directly. So remove the aspects of this project that relate to using a make file. Let's focus on the Docker Compose version of launching this project. Again, I'm going to poke it to change code by poking it to change the README. Please update the README with relevant instructions. All right, so it's asking me to delete a file. This is good, right? We want it to ask, be kind, ask, don't just do things. So I accept that deletion. Looks good. Removing stuff from the README looks good. So I'm going to go into the README, and you'll see that's making a series of changes here in the chat window. It's one of the things Cursor does really well is it aligns your chat with the text editor. And in the same way that you're seeing this kind of conventional red is delete, green is add, that you see with the diff versions, you have that here. And then, in fact, I can one by one go through these and either add or remove them. I'm going to actually wait for it to finish its thought process. We'll go through this a little bit slower. So one of the things, okay, so it tends to give a summary at the end, helps you know that it's either complete or near complete. All right, so instead of keep, which would just keep all the changes, which you're doing like 80–90% of the time, I'm going to go ahead and just look at this file. One of the reasons to version control it also is that it color codes files that have been changed. So this beige color is with the M is a modified file. So these grayed ones weren't changed. This beige one was modified. Now I know to look at it. And so now I'm in the file kind of scanning down. I see some insertions and I see some deletions. And I can decide, yep, that one, yep, that one. And so this picking and choosing becomes really critical, especially when it's going down the wrong road. If it's just doing broad stroke stuff early on, you're probably fine. And in fact, I will keep it. It's really good at what it does, but again, you don't know, right? You have to read every single line it's giving you because you're liable for it, and you know it's the way of the world still. I don't think we're getting away from that for a while. All right, so let's go back to the preview mode of the README. Again, the human readable is good. I don't need to be in the code at that level yet. We're just doing basic stuff. All right, build and start the application. That sounds pretty good to me. We've already done the environmental stuff. Docker Compose build, Docker Compose up, view logs, access the application. Let's see if we can do this. Docker Compose. Now, you have to have Docker installed. I'm not going to cover that. There's some good guides that get you to like a basic Docker README, but it does have to be running by the time you run your Docker Compose. Now it's going to download, excuse me, the Docker image. For those who haven't used Docker before, I mentioned it being a full operating system. Like there is a Linux that's downloading. That's included here in this image line. And so if we actually look up, these are actually published On Docker Hub, if you Docker Hub and Google the name of your thing, you can learn a little bit more information about it. So here is the MySQL image in Docker Hub. If we look at it, we should be able to find what it's based on. It tends to be based on a very minimal type of Linux called Alpine, but sometimes it can be Debian or sometimes it can be Ubuntu. Let's see if this one goes into that. Oracle. So there's a few that are like other operating systems. Like I'm noticing Oracle there. I think their baseline one's probably Alpine. It's a safe bet that if it's just like a thing doing a thing, like an Apache or on MySQL database running in Linux, it's probably using Alpine. We'll go ahead and log into it as soon as it's done. So, okay, so the Docker build downloaded an image. The way to think of Docker images, they took an operating system with all the files and all the locations, and they froze it in time. And they said, this is an operating system with all this configuration, take a snapshot. It's the exact same concept of a version, a git commit in Git version control. They git committed an entire operating system, and they released that as an image. So that's what you're actually downloading, something that's pre-configured, already set up, all the dependencies, and when you run it is actually a thing. So let's go back to the README. Next step is the Docker up, Docker Compose up. All right. So it's going to do some download and setup. We'll watch as it does this. I think while it's doing that, why don't we take a look at Cursor, the account. Just, you know, you'll get into it. It's not too complicated. Go ahead and sign in. I believe I'm using let's see. Unable to verify that I'm a human. I'm a robot, people. That's what Cursor has a pretty strong use of AI in their security system, so I don't blame them. All right, so let's see. There's an error here. Now, here's one of my favorite things. You run into errors and you're troubleshooting all the time. And a lot of times the bad old days, you're like, oh my God, there's an error. Find the error code and look it up on Stack Overflow and Google. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight in the, so I'm in the terminal mode. It's one of the modes. And there's this add to chat, right? And so I'm going to highlight the relevant part and say add to chat. And if you see here, there's this thing, and what this is this is context. You're passing in context. Yes, yes, generally speaking, your agent and your ask have full understanding of your code, but you generally still want to like point it at something. It will not by default have access to your terminal. However, you can get it to monitor the terminal. You can actually get it to monitor even web pages and other more complicated integrations, especially that's where MCP servers come into play. You can get your agents out of just looking at your code and onto either software on your computer or even external web resources. But here I'm just going to say, I noticed an error in the Docker Compose up. Is this a problem or concern? And obviously implying what's the fix. Now I changed it to ask mode. Agent mode from a billing perspective is expensive. You have a finite number of agent queries a month. And you can see why, right? It's doing the heaviest processing. It's actually proposing things. Ask is a little bit more affordable. So try and use Ask anytime you can get away with it, especially if you're actually asking a question. But just remember to switch back and forth. Let's see, the MySQL database failed to start and is making unhealthy, which is causing dependency failure. Let's also double check as a human. In Docker, when you set up multiple of these instances, you have like a drop down here in the GUI, and you see that 2 of the services are running. The MySQL one is running. The one for like logging into your database, which we don't need, is running. However, the server ones are definitely not green, not running. So we definitely have an issue. The MySQL init runs before the Flask starts. Okay, great. Give me a second also to let somebody in. Where is it? Sorry, can you hear me? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can.
I was just like, I'll hop it in close a second. Okay, sorry about that. All right, there we go. So admit. All right, so the init script is trying to access tables that don't exist. Fix ensures. All right, so one thing to be aware of is that in ask mode, it may propose something, but it won't actually run it yet. So it might let you run it by clicking this plus button. So like there's an apply to actually run it. So it can propose things, and basically it's switching from ask mode to agent mode on the fly in the GUI. But you just, sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it's best to, what I'll do here in this case, after I paste a 3, not what I wanted. I'm just going to write a summary. I noticed an error in Docker compose up. What's the issue? All right. Now, what I'm going to do is switch to agent mode and say, resolve the issue with the HTTP service not being able to launch. So you kind of identified an issue. It's inheriting its memory. It knows what it's talking about. So I'll go from ask mode into agent mode and say, actually do the thing now. All right. Now Docker, and this is part of that prior knowledge stuff too. Docker has a default, which I actually really hate, which is Docker instances are actually default to not running persistently. They can run persistently, and they do often, but the default is it runs a task, and when the task is completed, it shuts down. It's a really good fit for something like if you have like a PDF converter, you load your Word file into the Docker, it converts it, it outputs it, you get a PDF, the Docker shuts down. But for these long-running processes, it's a pain because it means I can't launch the command line into the operating system. And a lot of times, the reason that it shuts down, this is just from prior knowledge as a developer, is that the Apache doesn't start. And the Apache, it hard dies if the config file is off, right? So there's this http.conf file, that the Apache is using. And if that has any bug in it, or there's some modular dependency, it doesn't have it, then the whole Apache will die. On a normal operating system, that's fine. The operating system is still running, but the program is down. But in Docker world, if the key program that you launched with Docker is down, then the whole thing goes down. Like just so I have nothing to do, I'm shutting down. All right, we're going to go ahead and keep those, apply the fixes. So we're going to Docker down things. Docker down would be, oops, cancel. Docker down shuts down things, hopefully. You can double check that in the GUI. Yep, it's down. And then Docker up with the build tag now. So we're going to rebuild it, not just turn it back on, but actually rebuild it. So we'll get that running. Hopefully it'll apply the fixes. Get this going. All right. And basically what I'm probably going to do from a version control perspective is let's just keep going until we have a working instance. And then once we have a working instance, okay, time to take a snapshot. You don't need to version control every failure. It's kind of a judgment call thing when to take version control commits. More is better than less. You know, I can always take a bunch of commits, and even if they're bad commits, I still have them at least. But I think in this case, we don't have enough substance where I'm too worried about things changing, so we can just keep going until it's working. All right, so let's take a look. I'm seeing some weird rebooty stuff, which I'm not super happy about. Not exactly sure what it's doing either. Maybe it's starting and crashing. I don't know. What I can try and do is, no, I can't open in terminal until it's a stable running environment. So we'll give it a second. It's definitely having some issue. I think there's a Docker status. And by the way, this is not sacrilege. This is best practice. I recommend that you have your ChatGPT or your Copilot open and just ask it other questions. You can kind of play them against each other a little bit. Say, this one AI said that. What do you think? But my question is very tactical and direct. How do you show running Docker images? It's some kind of PS command, which is Docker PS, I think. Yep, Docker PS. Docker PS. Take a look at what's running. I'm going to clear things. Docker PS again. All right, restarting. So, okay, so we have more information here, and I do believe we're in a bug state. The restarting is not normal. So I'm just going to add, again, same methodology, add to the terminal, add to chat right there. And we'll go ahead and do, I see the service is the Docker instance keeps rebooting for HTTPD. What's the issue? Please resolve. Get that running. All right, so it wants to run something dynamically. I love when it does this because it automatically inherits its own feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and click run. I had the option to stop it or suggest something else. Like I can skip it and reject and tell what to do. So skip is, so first of all, skip isn't necessarily stop. Skip is definitely don't run this, but it will return to the agent, and the agent may decide, well, instead of that, let me try this. So skip will still continue its thought process, but we'll definitely not run this thing. Run is run it. But the more nuanced one that they just recently added is reject and tell what to do differently, which I love. So if you see that it's going down a route and you're like, that's not quite right, you can intercept it and be like, Well, instead of this, which is close, do this instead. So like if I click reject and tell what to do, I could have said, don't use PowerShell to run this, use command prompt. Doesn't really matter. Like that's just for example, but like hopefully you're bringing some actual useful knowledge. All right, okay, so it's running the same thing, but just now in command prompt. Looks good, let it run. All right, so had a bug. It's gonna self fix, thinks it's missing a dependency. Okay, that's great. Go ahead and keep that. Looks good. Now let me check. Go ahead and, I guess, doing some additional other checks. Okay. All right. It found an issue with the app.py. All right. Looks good. A lot of this early stuff, it's pretty safe to just accept. I mean, you don't have anything to break. So, I mean, hopefully, again, like there's no replacing knowing what a Docker Compose file, knowing what these volumes mean. You have to have software developer experience to be a good AI software developer. And I think that's the big societal bait and switch, is that they're in a sense over promising what you can do with vibe coding. I think vibe coding is best to accelerate mid and senior developers. But if you're a junior developer, the caution to look out for is that if you never think, you never activate your brain, you never read the code, you never read the documentation, you never learn what a Docker Compose file is, what its syntax is, you don't know how to prompt elegantly. And that's a really big distinction, because the non-elegant prompting is where failure, but also bugs and inefficiencies and also costs, right? Like these queries are not free. And so you want to be kind of early on. My evangelical statement is just try and learn traditional developing still, and look for projects where you can code the old school way, even more so if you're a junior. I know also learn AI tools, keep up with trends, but even more so if you're a junior, learn how to do it without AI first, because the AI is going to go down rabbit holes, and you can't tell the day from the night unless you have a prior knowledge base. And you just, I will say that I'm doing high productivity things, like I am setting up a developer environment, which is, by the way, like something that does take a lot of time early on in a project, but I'll do it, in a few queries and such. But you can't, you could do yourself a disservice by not learning fundamentals. All right, so you see me just going through kind of a blind recursive troubleshooting session. Generally, it has questions. Like, it's pretty proactive with things that it wants to do. It's trying the same thing in different ways. It's making small changes. Sometimes it will run how do I say? It'll create a test file and be like, well, let me try this thing out. All right. It thinks it's healthy. Let's take a look. Green's all over. We love it. Let's take a look now. Again, it's very clearly pointing us at a web application page. If Docker was composed, so Docker, recall, is an operating system, and it exists inside a container. That container by default is isolated from your Windows, as in the files aren't the same, they don't talk. But there are exceptions that you set up in your, there's exceptions that you set up in your compose file. So for example, this port 8080, this actually is running inside the Linux, but is accessible in Windows because we've allowed it directly through presumably the Docker Compose file somewhere. We have that. There are ways to get also files synced again, we like, and one of the best practices, very much so, is we like doing vibe coding, and even the products of vibe coding, we like doing them in containers, because at any time, any of our code could just recursively delete itself or something crazy. Like we want to hedge risks by not giving it access to our host operating system. We want to do things in a virtual environment. Joe, what's your question?
I was wondering about your thoughts on if vibe coding has affected front-end coding as much as it has affected back-end coding.
Absolutely has, and the latter half of this call will be all for Syed to cover that. That'll be his focus. All right, so yes, it's running, but yes, we also have a bug, and that's fine. Like, we've made progress. Now, there's a few ways to do this, and if I can, I'm going to try and do the fancy way. Let me see if I can get that. At URL, at browser. Give me a second. So by default, so there's a few things that you can do. One of the things that you can do is you can pass, and this is where some of the superpowers come from, which is that the agent, can do research for you. I believe it can pull URLs for you. The best case, for example, is if you have API documentation. A lot of times API documentation, there's like a documentations page, and it's very obscure. We don't like it. It's very, blah. It's made kind of robotic, but it's fine, right? It covers some of the concepts, etc. So one of the things you can do, though, is say, learn this documentation and do it. I'm also thinking more about, I wanted to see that error. So I'm going to do the @ symbol. @ is how you pass it additional context. You'll notice that by default, you can select individual files in your project. So if I knew I was editing one of these files, I'd say, hey, at readme, update the section about blah, 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 blah. In this case, I'm actually going to do something else. There's @ and if you paste a URL, let me do @ does that work? Give me a second here. I don't remember if it works for the local host, because it's more for going out to URLs, but I have a package here. Let me do cursor settings. I just need to remind myself. In cursor, where are the MCP settings? Open settings, cursor settings, MCP server. So MCP servers are kind of an advanced concept. You don't strictly need them, but they're pretty handy, and be aware of them pretty early, even if you're not using them yet. They let your agent, which can do things outside of its normal context of adding and editing files. And so you can add plugins that add more and more features. Let me see, search MCP. Yes, this browser MCP is what I want. Go back at browser MCP, is it? Can you see that error? What I'm going to do is, I don't know if I've set the @ correctly. Let me just real quick test that. Don't think it can. So I don't think it's at browser MCP. The page is showing 404 not found. Is that factual? I don't think that's the error. Well, maybe it is the error. Okay. Missing user requested. All right. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, because I don't know if it's hallucinating right now or if it's actually right. So my question is, in the browser error, did you see the text blah, blah, blah. Some specific stuff. Yeah, okay, so it says I have access. Okay, great. All right, so it sees the error. It probably has an opinion. I'm gonna go switch to agent mode. Apply. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I did it or not. I am going to do that version control because we technically we have a running server. It's just not serving a good code file, but that's still a milestone. So git commit, git add everything, git commit minus message is running Apache broken Flask. All right. And now apply the changes from the 404 not found error from at, and then I'm just going to put the URL again, mostly actually for the documentation that we're building. I know it already has access to it in memory, but since I'm not going back to those commands, we'll go ahead and put that here. Go into our documentation and get that up to date. All right, so now it's getting into proper code. Switching from infrastructure setup to code setup, your mandate as a software developer is to go slower now because anything it's doing, any package it's adding, any function it's calling, from this point forward, we're very concerned about security, right? I don't like third-party packages, generally speaking, but I use them all the time. But do you really need it? Is it one I've seen before? Is it common? And fundamentally, do I trust it? Slow down if you don't know these packages, right? Don't just blindly install things. That is a huge security vulnerability. Be aware that one of the most common and most malicious ways people are getting into production systems now is called, I can't remember the exact term, but it's like supply chain hacking. And it's basically the supply chain is that you have a dependency and it's a third-party project you've never looked at. You're just trusting it, but should you trust it? You assume it's open source, it's safe, not necessarily. And in fact, we know for a fact that some countries will play a long game of they will be maintainers, and for years they'll do ethical maintenance and support of these open source packages. But when they're ready to pull the trigger, they'll plop in some malicious code somewhere. So even things that used to be safe may not be safe anymore. And it's just, you know, you are liable for whatever you add to your project. So again, the no think that this pushes you to is a risk, and be aware of the risks. Be able to maintain them. All right, so it looks like it's investigating the Dockers. Let's take a look. I do see that the web app is down. That's okay. It's going to start, hopefully. So Docker logs, it's pulling in logs. It's able to look at them itself, which is great. Starting up the web instance of the Docker. PS is just like list ones that are running, so it'll see, oh yeah, things are running. All right, let's check on the GUI. We have a bunch of greens. That's good. It's doing its happy summary. Your application is now working. But is it though? Let's find out. Reload. Hey, we have thingies. All right, so that's cool. Let's do something. Let's do something applied. So here's some of the superpowers that you should be aware of. Like, why setting up developer environments? Yeah, whatever. I can do that. You know, I can just clone a project that does that. But what's some of the real superpowers? It's that large language models bring in knowledge and context, and especially with the agents design, can bring in applied knowledge. So let's look at some kind of wiki on investment algorithms. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. All right, so let's see if I can find one. High frequency trading. I'm just looking for like buzzwords, something mathematical. Another one, low latency. So like let's do okay, Markov, Monte Carlo. Okay. So let's do some brainstorming on the spot, right? So we don't have to do that in the chat unless we want to, but can Markov chain Monte Carlo be used for investment algorithms for day trading? Yes. Okay. Use cases, high frequency trading. What would a concept Python that uses this look like? All right, so we're starting to bring some stuff in. Again, feel free to use and mix and match your Google thingy, all your tools, they all work together. What I will say is that when you have something, consider the agent, consider its strength to be text awareness. So yes, it can work with URLs, and yes, you can pass it documents, but Cursor was built to edit code. So one of the things that I recommend is having a file somewhere. Like if you want to pass it a bunch of stuff, and especially if you want it to be kind of foundational knowledge for the rest of your project, just create a text file. I'm going to call it background.txt, and I'm going to paste some of the stuff, and then I'm happy to also do maybe summarize simply the goal of this Python and use key language from math or finance concepts. All right. Time series modeling, we love it. Bayesian inference, we love it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm just going to paste that into our backgrounds file. Again, all I'm doing this for is I'm playing tricks with how I do my prompting. Now, I could put all of this in here in this one context window. Now, context windows are finite, right? You'll run into a capacity at some point. And the way that this works is it has kind of a superpower, I would say, of being able to work with like thousands of lines of code in all of your files, whereas in your prompt you don't have necessarily thousands. You have maybe 1,000 or something, but you can work with basically more text in your project than can fit in the context window of your prompt. So that's one of the kind of neat little hacks that I have personally found useful. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add that background to my context. So I've added it, and then @ symbol, and then just, now it's in my context. I can talk about it. Please see that I have an investing idea from an AI in the background file. I'll make this code base accessible after. In the background file, please propose a way of getting this into our Flask application. Now this is going to be one of the big prompts. Some prompts are like add a small thing. Some of them are like design me the system. So especially for the ones that are big, having more context and ideas that you're providing is good. One of the things that I know right away is to do day trading, you need to have an API that will let you do day trading. Well, I happen to know of one, which is Alpaca API, stock-based API stuff. And all I really want from this is its API link. So here's the trading API right here. as a human in the bad old days, I'd have to read through this or like go to key sections and find. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell this to understand it. So if anybody has worked with spiders and crawling, this is what the agent will do. It will go here, it will see these links, and it will go to these links, and it will investigate. And this is a huge seismic shift on the internet. Most web traffic right now is not human. Most web traffic is agent-based and all these automated systems that are pulling information to build information, right? So when and actually the server hosters hate it, but whatever. I'm going to tell it to learn this whole API, and it's going to download all the pages. And so that's one of the superpowers of agent-based development. So I believe, yeah, so I paste it, and there's this add link, so I can convert this to a link. When you do the at with the URL and then add link, this is now a context. Now it's a context that it will pull. It will pull using your local IP address. So like your server, your laptop is technically the one that's doing all the outreach, but it will still pull it for you. Please use the Alpaca API as a guideline for how to do some of the paper trade. So paper is like automated trade or like pretend trades, and that's we don't want to be too serious right here. So we're doing paper trading. What else? I think that's it. So we have this crazy concept of Markov chains, and we have the Alpaca trader. Now, will it get it right? Not necessarily. Let me. I think I'm on the wrong account. Hold on. Ran into a thingy. If you run into this, go ahead and sign up. You can also switch your accounts. So I just have to see what profile. I ran into a limit, which is not what I wanted. See, okay, it's this gear icon actually. Manage account, DMV Petri dish. It's not the one that I want to be on. Okay, so let me switch. Now the good news that I have found is that it preserves your context window pretty well. I do need to log out and then log in, and I hope this works because we were having issue before. All right, so it'll email, presumably. There it is. All right. Yes, log into Cursor Desktop. Desktop is now synced. And again, I can just continue with this query. I'm just going to say retry. It's pretty smart, so it can just say retry that last agent query. All right. All right. So now it's doing the stuff. It's bringing in things that I recognize, right? So NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib. Now let me tell you something, because this reminds me of a very important lesson. It seems magic, and it is in a lot of regards. Keep in mind the fundamentals of what's going on. This is an LLM. It at one point was trained on a vast amount of information gathered from the internet. And its bias in what it's going to recommend is based on that. How recently was that trained? Was that yesterday? No. This was trained a year ago, a few months ago, 8 months ago. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, what did it do? It went out on the internet and it scoured all of the forums, all of the support channels, all of the Reddit posts. If you go to the Reddit, what are on these websites? They're questions from 5 to 10 years ago. And what that means is that the number one problem that I run into time and time again, especially when it comes to dependencies, is that it has a bias to recommend the most popular answer, but the most popular answer was probably, or could have been, from a previous generation that's now deprecated. And this, in fact, is an example of that. I just know this, right? And it's a hard thing to find out. I don't really have a good way to do it other than what you'll notice with a very common thing is, like, it will give you the latest of some dependencies, and it will give you a super outdated versions of another dependency, right? And it will try and mix it. And then when you're running your code, you'll run into these weird things where, like, it should work. It seems like everything's up to spec, but, like, you're just getting these really obscure errors of, like, conflicts, and you don't know why. A lot of times it's because you have inconsistent dependencies that were not of the same generation. So do be aware that there is a bias for LLMs to base answers on the state of information in the training set, which could have been trained months ago. And also, the most popular answers on the internet were probably popular technologies for like 10 years, but may not factor in the latest versions of things that just aren't as commented on the internet. So here's an example where I know that this is deprecated. I ran into this issue before. Alpaca Pi. You just kind of have to find ways to catch these things. There's no easy way to do this. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to flag in my brain to have it swap it. So generally, swapping from two similar dependencies, pretty straightforward for the agent to do. All right, so it's going to rebuild the Docker. All good, no problem. Get a bunch of the requirements. So while that's going, I would say, please switch away from the current use of the old Alpaca API to the new one, Alpaca Pi. And again, I'm including the URL as context. But it's actually doing some of the math here. Now, Bayesian service. Bayesian is an advanced mathematical concept. I am not well positioned to answer questions. Presumably, if you're working in a technical domain, at some point, either you need to know it or you need to find people that know it. The point that I want to show you, though, is not necessarily that it's the end-all, be-all of information, but that you can do things that are outside of your skill set and beyond your scope. I am not a mathematician. I do not know what Bayesian day trading is. However, I know how to read code, and I do know that, Wiki and these, even just like Medium articles probably have like the top 10 common ways to do whatever with some key buzzwords. And what's really enlightening is that buzzwords are enough to get started, not necessarily to drive it all the way to profitable trading algorithms, but it's enough to get started. And that is a huge change, just that. Now you can bring in domain knowledge that you don't have and apply it to code. I recommend you still know your code, and eventually you have to know the domain knowledge too. But say, for example, We're using API documentation, which is a really good fit. But say there was like some federal legislation, I don't know, like let's say tree or highway legislation document. I'm just looking for like a very wordy URL somewhere. Transcript, something long. Next document. Complete list of documents. So keep in mind that it's going to need text-based things primarily. Can use PDFs. Well, in any case, my point is that in the agent world, similar to how I'm calling out an @ URL for an API, you could @ a wiki page, or you could @ the start of a knowledge base. Now they should be publicly accessible, generally speaking. You're looking up you're looking up web pages, and the web pages, and it can do like the spider thing pretty well, which is like find links on the page, go into those, find links on those, go into those. Like it can do that pretty well. All right, so it's doing that. All containers are running. Simple script for sample market data for testing. Great. We like testing. All right. Now, at this point, not only do I want to know what it's doing, which, you want to ask a question, what is it? What are you actually doing here? But I want it documented in the README. So actually, I've added this to the run queue for switching. I will let this kind of process resolve. It's obviously it's testing stuff and iterating. We're happy to let it iterate. Now, there's one thing that's important to be aware of, especially because think of this as money, right? I'm an agent, I'm spending money. I'm also using an enormous amount of electricity. So, there's an ethical in here too, as far as the resources that go into agent-based systems. But if I think it's being productive, I will let it iterate. And if I think it's going down a rabbit hole, your tendency is to continue allow. But if it's just off base, it is just like you are going into crazy directions, stop it. And what I mean is literally click the stop button, right? So you're better off stopping something halfway through and reprompting it to get it going down the rabbit hole than trying to wait for the agent to go from being dumb to being smart. It's kind of it's a subjective, this is kind of that vibe coding skill set. You have to kind of get a sense for, is it being productive? Are these tests that it's trying, these experiments that it's trying out, are they useful experiments? If so, great, let it run. It'll get some more information. But if it's like, well, let me change from this API to this other API that might work better, but that's totally bubkiss, don't let it go down that route. Stop it, intercept it. You will save more of your time. It's the highest #1 pro that I've seen is that you can call in those external resources and have more advanced knowledge and applications than your skill set, as far as like, I don't know what Bayesian is, all that math stuff. That's the #1 pro. But the #1 con is that troubleshooting is kind of broken. It's not great. I'm going to click keep all. And what I mean by that is that typically software troubleshooting, you'd run it, you'd be like, there's an error on line 10. You go to line 10, be like, I think that's right. Let me change it, blah, blah, blah. And you'd run it again. You get to maybe line 16. And what I would say is that it's slow, but it's cumulative growth. You are making improvement every time you iterate on the troubleshooting. With AI, because it has a tendency to just invent things and propose dramatically different solutions, it could rewrite the exact same file in 10 totally different mechanics, right? And it means that you are more beholden to the agent getting it right the first time, and it's much harder to make cumulative incremental improvements. So it is on you to prompt well early, of course, but also think about either not letting it change big things. Maybe you can also like focus. So if it wasn't clear, not only can you pass the the app models folder, if I could do the whole file, and that's probably all you need to do, at models. But the other thing that you could do is you could just drag your section, highlight it, and there's still this add to chat, right? So models lines 5 through 20, and then like you could just say rework this one section to blah 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 blah, right? So it's on you. There's kind of an art to the breadth of the change you allow your system to make. And we're all learning, right? And also these models are getting better as time goes on. So it's try it out, right? Like it's definitely more. We're still more of a art than a science at this point. All right, so we'll see if we can get this going. It's found some key changes to make. Yeah, okay, looks good. Switch to this new alpaca thing. We like it. Keep. Now I need to update the init method. Sounds legit. So there's a lot of iteration. That that's par for the course. If you imagine that we've written already 300 lines, it's it's worth our patience here because it is still doing an enormously leveraged amount of work for what we would have done as humans. And it's also, again, you'll notice that it's being proactive with what it's prompting. I didn't know I had to also update the execute paper trade method. It makes sense now that it says it, but like I didn't proactively know it. It was proactive. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it will learn your project and it'll learn you better and better as you use it. So if at one point you said, I like my functions to end this way, and you've said it maybe 3 or 4 times, it'll just start doing that going forward. Like it won't ask you anymore. It'll just become closer and closer to really understanding you, at least your preferences. And that's great, right? We want to do stuff like that. All right, so it's now recreating and rebuilding the Docker. Not my favorite. There's different ways when you add and change dependencies. A lot of times I don't rebuild the Docker. I'll just like log into the operating system and just kind of do it on the fly. But I don't mind doing it this way. It's easy. It's just a few clicks. In the meantime, while this is running, let me see. Where is? Could be running. Oh, it's building. I see, building. Not pulling up. Interesting. All right. Well, as it's doing that, I remind you that it is best practice to actually understand your code. Now, I'm going to show you understanding your code and how to do that leveraging LLMs, but there's the old way too, and don't lose sight of the old way, which is get a sense for what's going on. I have a routes file. Okay, I have paths. I have a health. I have a portfolios. I have a dashboard. Okay, cool. Bunch of route stuff. Let's see what it's doing here. Docker Compose up. We like it. Sample data, PY. Okay. Create sample data, blah, 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 blah. We like it. Bayesian service, object-oriented design, we love it. Bayesian trading service, we like that. You need to understand it a little bit better, perhaps. I'm noticing right away that they're kind of packing some of the alpaca stuff into that. So it's Bayesian plus trading. Maybe best practice would be 2 separate files for that, 2 separate classes. But that's fine. All right, let's take a look. Is it happy? Yes. Okay. So one thing on the Docker stuff is if it's green, if it's running, you can open the terminal to it, and it by default is not running bash. The first thing you should do is run bash, and that's your standard interface. So now I'm actually in the operating system, and I think I can do lsb lease minus a. No, they don't have it. Linux, find version of Linux, cat, etc. OS release. All right, so this is Debian. I thought it was Alpine, but it's Debian. Those are 2 of the most common ones for Docker images, but it is a full Linux operating system. We'll let it. I think it's almost done. Curl. It's trying to check itself. I think. I'm going to stop it. I think it's probably it's just trying to check its connectivity, but we can do that as a human. And in fact, let's do that now. Reload. Where are we? It's running. Go to dashboard. Okay, we love it. Reload. Okay. All right. So this is great. It's written us 5 or 8 lines of code, but let's be all very honest. We don't know what the heck this stuff is. Have it tell you, right? So now I'm gonna keep it in agent mode, because the first thing I wanted to do is write a summary of key sections, key concepts, and classes in the README, and explain how to use this app to view a sample portfolio. Let's see. Just have to reopen the prompts. All right. So, all right. Did it do it? Let's double check. We should see a bunch of stuff in the README. We do. You can read the information. It's fine. Like you should probably read what it says in chat. I like to have it summarize things in like very official capacities, and the README is a really good way to do that. You can also have it say like, I want a knowledge base, or I want a document that tracks key concepts. Make sure all my document that tracks key concepts are updated, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to see the preview, because I do want to close. I have a knowledge gap. The agent knows more than I know, and that's a problem. And I want to be very aware of that. And so now I want to have it help me learn my stuff. Probably going to switch this to ask mode, start to understand it better. So, okay, we have a model view controller. I'm familiar with that. Portfolio, investment, trading strategy, trade, all trading service, Bayesian trading service, paper trading, web interface, statistical. All right, so let me ask it a question. Is there a way to view sample data or an example trading strategy or back testing in our current project. So go to trading, create sample data. Oh, we have a thingy. Strategy name, phase 1, symbol, sure, AAPL. Create strategy created successfully, analyze, could not generate trading signal, run. Okay. So we're getting now more into the nuance of this web application. Let me see if we can do one last thing just to get something very satisfying out of this. So the trading page, right? So on the /trading URL, I created a strategy, and clicked analyze, but got a message, error, blah, 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 blah. Instead, could this button show a chart with, at this point, for the purposes of this call, I'm going to say mock-up data, but you could say like with actual data queried from the API. With mock-up, market and returns data. And this could also be part of building out your prototype, is maybe you're not clear on things, but you want to have like a starting interface. Take a look at what it's doing. It's reading few things. It's reading the trading. It's going to kind of jump around your code base and try a few things. Oh, I might be in ask mode. So I'm going to stop it right away because that's just a waste of time. Switch it to agent mode and say, try to implement this again, but continue now as an agent. All right, so let's see if it does some useful coding for us. Hopefully it does. Again, bringing in dependencies. Do I trust Chart.js? Probably I do, but that's prior knowledge, right? You have to be accountable. You have to know these things. Could it also be a backdoor for stealing credit card information? Of course, yes, it could. So this one might be a longer one. It is adding a substantial information. All right, fine. Well, I was deciding if we should bring it down or not. At this point, generally rebuilding your Docker means you're probably doing something a little bit bizarre. Your system should be flexible enough that instead of restarting or rebuilding a Docker, maybe it just needs to reboot the Docker or something. We'll prompt it a little bit more specifically next time, just because I want this to for sure work and just continue. I'll just accept it. But I think what I probably should have done was reject and recommend something else. And I would have said, instead of rebuilding this, why not just reboot it and issue some commands into it to install whatever you need to install. But that's okay. Different ways to do it. It's checking. All right, routes. All right, so I'm going to do a hard refresh, Control-Shift-R, hard refresh. Analyze. Hey, okay. So this is new, right? We added something substantive. It's an idea. You may have ideas that you want to bring to it. So again, this is a very code first. Hopefully you kind of know, like, this is the situation where actually if you have a client that has like a lot of information already, and especially if they can give it to you in text, great, right? Like you can just copy paste and say, hey, this is what the client wants, build me something like that. And especially if they don't care about aesthetics. Now you'll notice that the baseline aesthetics are very pasty. You might want to take a pause and say, improve the aesthetics by maybe using, what is it, like, is it Next.js, one of those really pretty ones? You know, take a look at some of these, or just recommend some of the more stylish JavaScript things for it to use for like some out-of-the-box aesthetic. Otherwise, it will tend to default to things that look very bootstrappy, which is fine. Like, it works. But if you're pitching to an investor and you want to differentiate, consider adding very early on in your framework setup a choice on some of the aesthetic characteristics, and it'll try and support you there. All right. So at this point, you know, we have a web app. I will go ahead and make my commit, git status, bunch of uncommitted files, git add dot, git status. Okay, they're ready to add, git commit, git commit minus message, rough prototype resolved. And again, remember that if you don't understand your own code base, ask, right? Like, ask your code base. If there are new things you want to try, bring in some of those things as text files and say, hey, what about this idea? Just like kind of brainstorming, and either add your brainstorming to the chat prompt, or if it's more persistent, add it as a file. And then just keep your version control up to date. Before we move on to Syed's portion, I want to pause for questions on my side. So I guess, Joe, I see your hand raised. Other folks, if you want to raise your hands, please do. But Joe, if you have a question.
Hi, I left my hand up by accident, but here's a question. How common is vibe coding for DevOps type practices?
I would say increasingly common, because a lot of DevOps is just exactly identical to the concept of this Docker Compose file. Most DevOps is configured in a text file. So even if you're setting up like 100 servers, you'll have one file that like kind of roughly roughs out all the configuration for all those servers and all those things. And so the act of running DevOps, at least from a first time spin up perspective, can be supported by this pretty directly and pretty immediately. There are other more nuanced aspects of DevOps that are like, someone needs to monitor the errors on the server and somebody needs to answer a call when the server is down. Machines won't replace directly, but you can have agents monitoring the health of your platform and supporting that human endeavor. So I would say increasingly common. I have heard subjectively that there's some pushback to it, but that's very opinionated. Ultimately, I don't think a business should care where the code comes from, but they need to care about the quality of the code. So you are liable if you're a DevOps person. Same as like a lawyer who cites a case that doesn't exist. If you cite something that brings your infrastructure down, you're like, oh, I was just using an AI tool. It's on you, and you might get fired. So you do have to appreciate it as if it was your code from that perspective. Wilfred, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm, I guess just starting out and trying to get it. And what can I do to differentiate myself? Because it feels like now more than ever, what was already an uphill battle and just finding work now feels even more so, because why hire me when I could when you could hire a novice or somebody who's just starting out, when you could hire a junior who's been doing it for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And then can use code. Like what can I do to differentiate myself and get myself at the very least an entry level position so I can, start? Like what can I do? Right now I'm looking for open source projects. I've already joined at least 2 of them. I've done my own application.
That's obviously a big question, and it's not a simple answer. What I would say is I would recommend you to consider the leverage I've demonstrated. There's one thing that, again, if you take nothing away, consider that within a line of code I was doing advanced mathematics, right? And yes, you should understand this, right? You need to learn the NumPy and what is a data frame and what are all these things. But consider the leverage that you have as now a Vibe Code empowered developer to take on more broad, more ambitious projects. Again, the class where this fits is the style of projects where these are prototypes, and you can approach a business and say, let's try out this ambitious new thing, and we'll just try it out, right? Year 1, we'll try it out. And so you have an enormous leverage in being able to go deeper, bigger, earlier in your career on these harder topics. And there's advice I would give you on how you need to learn the soft skills on sharing that narrative. So first of all, take it from the guy giving a talk on vibe coding, for whatever that means, that you still need deep technical knowledge, and I've seen nothing to show that that coders are unneeded. If you have a coding challenge, you need a human. Now, humans with experience have disproportionate leverage in their productivity, but you need a human, right? So I'm not saying that we're hiring as many coders, but we're not hiring coders. And the coders we do hire need to have exceptional quality. So you can make a case that you still need a really deep subject matter expertise. The other thing is, think about how you can apply solutions in ways that connect with business owners more than before. So whereas I'm not a day trading expert, but I can now talk to somebody and say, hey, Mr. Finance guy, I did a Bayesian analysis with these buzzwords in a project, and I can show you. And if you have other buzzwords, tell them to me, and I will include them within a week, right? And so you can provide more business value, but you do have to take on that the paradigm shift is that it's not enough to just assume coding is productive. You really have to focus on adding values to businesses and what that does. Again, big answer, hard thing to say. I'm happy to one-on-one with you if you contact me on Meetup for a personal advising session. But a lot of it is, yes, do go for applied experiences and do differentiate yourself with more subject matter expertise. Why don't we just go ahead and get into Syed's presentation, because I think we'll have some other really good kind of broad questions, but I do want to hear his perspective from the product design.
Yeah, I definitely think that moving into the stage, like you showcase how to set up the environment, but then of course when you're having a discussion with a client or you're having a project, a lot of the thing is, do you want to test those ideas and concepts out really quickly? And I do think that with like especially front end focused vibe coding, you can get a lot of those concepts and ideas out really quickly, and also like create some cool stuff for yourself. That's what I've been doing with a lot of this. I will say that I don't have the expertise of a backend and like even running Cursor. So like this is something that I'm also learning, but I hope whatever I share from the front end perspective and like how like in your question, Wilfred, I also heard that you were also questioning how a younger person with now these tools would be in competition. So that way you can look at me as that person that, I came into product design a couple of years ago, and now I'm learning these tools as well for myself. So you'll get into like how I'm using it as is right now in my work as well.